originally did the Iran deal
Yeah.
back to the State Department. Do you have any thoughts about that? And I also
Yeah,
heard
yeah,
like
I actually
Iran
do have
said,
thoughts on that. Right. As a matter of
well, I'm
fact,
sure you do.
yeah, I do. It's something I thought about.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's explain. Let's take a step
Yeah.
back here. In 2011 through 2015, the Obama administration negotiated the Iran deal. The Iran deal was an effort to stop Iran from nuclear weapons and incentivized Iran not to develop them by giving them um, money, both America's money, and also freeing money that belonged to Iran that was in banks around the world that American sanctions had prevented Iran from getting to. It was their money. America did not give Iran $150 billion. Okay. You'll hear a lot of Republican members of Congress say that, and it's completely not true. Iran had $150 billion, with a B, $150 billion in the bank, and America put laws on that did not allow those banks to give Iran their money. Okay, so that's how it worked. By the way, great map here. One day I'll be able to figure out how to do this. That's Iran. Okay. Anyway, but the money wasn't there, and they wanted it. So that's how they designed the deal. The deal was faulty. The deal was faulty in its inception and how people thought of the deal. And Iran cheated in the deal, and Israel was very against the deal. And President Trump was against the deal. So when President Trump came into office, he pulled America out of the deal. Most deals that presidents sign with other countries are called treaties, and treaties under the United States Constitution have to be approved by the Senate. President Obama knew it wouldn't get approved by the Senate, so he just made a deal. The deal doesn't have the authority of the United States government. So therefore, every president can just go in or out of the deal without an act of Congress because it was never approved by Congress. So that's how President Trump just decided to announce one day, we're leaving the deal, and then that was it. Okay, so now President Biden campaigned on the idea that the deal was a good deal, and that America should go back into the deal. Okay, now the thing is though is that things have changed since we pulled out of the deal. So the situation on the ground is different. Iran has developed more nuclear weapons, or not weapons, excuse me, more nuclear material. It's built things that it wasn't allowed to do under the deal, and once America pulled out, they felt not. So the deal has to be renegotiated. Okay, how much renegotiation is a very good question. Okay, for America to feel comfortable and Iran to feel comfortable, there's going to be a lot of negotiation. So who would you want as your negotiators? Obviously, we, Israel, meaning Israel, don't want the same people negotiating the deal because we didn't like what the first thing they did. So chances are we're not going to like it when they do it again. Unfortunately for us, right, the Biden administration, meaning President Biden, has hired essentially the exact same negotiating team. All of those people are back on board some way or another, some directly in the negotiations, others in other positions, but they'll still have a say. For instance, John Kerry was the Secretary of State under the deal and was one of the chief negotiators. So John Kerry is now back in the Biden administration, but he has a different job. He's not Secretary of State. He will be in charge of climate, okay? Climate, like the climate battle. So he'll be in charge of climate. But that seat has something, that position has a seat on what's called the NSC, the National Security Council, which is a group of people that discuss national security issues and advise the president on them. John Kerry is still a member of the NSC. So when they have these discussions, he'll be one of the people having the discussion. Samantha Power is another one. Some of these names might mean something to you. Some of them might not. And some of these people are very controversial. Like we really don't want them in the room. So that's what Shlomi's referring to. Look, I don't think it's fair to prejudge people before just based on their previous actions. I also think you have to keep in mind that President Biden is not, as much as people like to paint him, President Obama. That's what you'll always hear from critics of President Obama and President Biden. You will always pay attention to this because I nail all my Republican friends for doing this. They always say the Obama-Biden administration, right, as if it's one thing. Now, they never called it that before President Biden ran for president, okay? 2 years ago, you never heard the words Obama-Biden administration. Here's something else you'll never hear. The Trump-Pence administration, right? You'll never hear those words, right? Because it's the Trump administration. No one ever says the Reagan-Bush administration, the Clinton-Gore administration. You don't say that. The reason why they say that is because they want to tie everything that President Obama did to President Biden and stain him with those same things. That's unfair and it's ridiculous. So President Biden is going to take a different approach than President Trump. And I'll tell you this, and this is something that I'm so happy about. I spoke today. Remember, I try very hard to get you guys good access. So I spoke today for the first time for somebody in the Biden administration, okay, and talked to them about us and our program and everything. They actually are somewhat familiar with our program. And one of the things that I said that was so comforting that I appreciated so much was how public the Biden administration is making their discussions with the Israeli government. They're not just having discussions with the Israeli government, which is good because in the beginning of the Iran negotiations between the Iranians and the Obama administration, they shut Israel out. They didn't tell Israel. Israel found out by spying, not spying on the United States, but they were spying on the Iranians, and all of a sudden they started hearing American voices, and that's how Israel found out negotiations were going on. Okay, they were not told. Right away from the beginning of the Biden administration, the two national security advisors, Meir Ben Shabbat on the Israeli side and Jake Sullivan on the Biden side, on the American side, had talks. They talked this weekend, and they made it public, the fact that they talked. Okay, they're not shooting the breeze. How's the White House, right? They're talking about Iran. Supposedly Yossi Cohen, who is the head of the Mossad, who I think one day could be an Israeli prime minister, is going to, and then one of the people that Bibi Netanyahu trusts the most in the world, is going to be the first Israeli to meet with President Biden. He'll be going very soon to the White House to discuss Iran with him. Okay, when the Mossad director goes, he's got he brings always a package of secrets that nobody knows. Okay, so he'll be going. So that's very comforting to know that the Biden administration right away is dealing with Israel in a very open way. So that's very comforting. Again, it's unfair to prejudge. We're going to have to wait to see what happens. It's absurd to sit there and say like, oh, they're just going back to the deal and it's going to be bad. What's really even more absurd is when people say we shouldn't go back to the deal. When somebody says to you, we shouldn't go back to a deal. I shouldn't say the deal. I also don't think we should go back to the deal. So when somebody says we shouldn't have a deal with the Iranians, so just ask them, okay, what's your game plan then? How do you stop them from developing a nuclear weapon? Right? What's your plan? So, right. So I think that we should do regime change. I'm one of the crazy John Bolton guys that think that we should do that, but nobody agrees with me. Okay, so nobody thinks that we should do that. Everybody thinks we tried that in Iraq, it blew up in our faces. We've tried that in Cuba, it blew up in our faces. We tried that in many, many different places. America's not good at causing regime change. We don't know how to do it well. Okay, fine. So then we have to do a deal. And President Trump said in his second term in office, what he was planning on doing, what he campaigned on, was coming up with a deal within the first 2 months on Iran. So it wasn't like President Trump was going to continue this notion of no deal. He also was going to come up with his own deal. So a deal is the only way to go. But if somebody comes to you and says that we shouldn't have a deal, so then just ask them, okay, what's your plan? How do we get Iran not to develop a nuclear weapon? How do you get Iran to stop its terrorism? How do you get Iran to stop developing precision-guided missiles and ballistic missiles? How do you do this? Because I'll tell you, I'm terrified of getting hit by a precision-guided missile. That's a scary thing to say, right? I don't want to be hit by a precision-guided missile. Okay, I'm more scared of COVID, but I'm also scared of precision-guided missiles, and we got to stop Iran from developing them. So how do we do that? Okay, Shlomi, what else you got? Shlomi's gone. Okay, I don't know if he's literally gone or no. He's there, but he's not. I don't know. Anyway, okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, Rabbi, I'm about to cross the street.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you get to the other side. Okay, so what else we got? Any other questions? Shayla, that was not that funny. Okay. No one's got any other questions. We got like a whole world coming up. No one's got anything that they saw. It's because you guys don't look at the news, so therefore you have no questions. Okay.
Rabbi, I look at the news every day. It's nothing cool.
Right. By the way, you should know that is going to be the new thing. Okay, just so you understand that the Trump administration was very, put it this way, I put one thing complimentary and one thing derogatory about the Trump administration. The Trump administration was very active. Every day somebody was doing something, right? Like some new policy. Since the Trump administration lost the election, That was crazy that I said that, right? So, okay, so since they lost the election, okay, so almost every single day they did something that was pro-Israel. Okay, it's amazing. I wrote a list of 100 things that the Trump administration did that was pro-Israel until election day. The list almost doubled since election day. It was crazy. Every day, forget about the Abraham Accords. Every day there was something else that they were doing. They were very active. The Biden administration is not going to take that approach. They're not going to be trying to come up with new policies every single minute. That's not how they're going to do it. That's number one. Number two, under the Trump administration, they made news almost every single day. How do they make news almost every single day? Right? Because President Trump was on Twitter tweeting something crazy out, right? And then so that caused the whole firestorm. I got to tell you, in my life, as sad as this is, January 21st was one of the calmest days I've had in the last 5-6 years. Okay, the day after President Biden, because nothing happened. It's exactly like Shlomi's saying. Like, you check the news, nothing's happening, right? There's no, because President Trump hasn't said something to tick somebody else off. Didn't start a whole culture war. Nobody was attacking the Capitol, right? Yeah, like things seem pretty much normal. The White House every single day. Okay, let me take a step back. There is a person in the White House whose job is called the press secretary. Okay, the press secretary is the spokesperson for the president. Okay, today her name is Jen Psaki. Okay, Jen Psaki is the press secretary. Okay, under almost every single administration, besides the Trump administration, the press secretary gave a press conference every single day where they made announcements about what the administration was working on, anything they want everybody to know about, and then they would take questions. Okay, as I sit in front of a computer all day long, I don't have to, but I do. Okay, I sit in front of a computer all day long, and I always have something playing in the background. Okay, whatever it is. So I watched the press under the Obama administration. I watched this and the Bush administration. I watched every single day. I watched the press secretary's press conference. It's broadcast live. You can watch it on YouTube afterwards. Everything. Okay, fine. So, and there was always under the Obama administration something exciting. The Trump administration most of the time never had one. They haven't had one in like the last year of the presidency. They didn't have any press conferences. Okay, they had nothing. And then now Jen Psaki, who's the press secretary, so she does them. And they're like the most boring things in the world, right? Because nothing's happening. Like, oh, we're going to be having this thing is going on, and we're going to be trying to solve COVID this way. And like, you're just sitting there like, it's like an hour of like the most exciting thing was that the press is there to try to antagonize and try to catch them on something. The only thing they've caught the Biden administration doing wrong is that President Biden put an executive order that when you go on a federal building, like in a building owned by the United States of America, you have to wear a mask. And then President Biden and his family went on a federal building and they didn't wear a mask. Forget about the fact that the White House is a federal building. So I don't know how that works, that they have to be in the, but in any case, but everything else they have to, and then the Biden family didn't wear a mask. They didn't wear a mask. So if this was the Trump administration, it would be like, he was wearing a mask. You couldn't see the mask because you're blind. Okay? That's what the answer would have been. Okay. Under the
I'm
Biden
Sean
administration.
Spicer.
What?
That would be the Sean Spicer answer.
Right. So
Yeah.
under the Biden administration, it was like, oh yeah, you're right. You know, like it's true. We'll have to look into that. That probably won't happen again. Yeah, it wasn't like a stupid excuse. The first 3 days of the Trump administration was, I don't know if you guys remember this. You're very young, but the first 3 days of the Trump administration was spent on telling people that there were more people at the Trump inauguration than there were at the Obama one for 3 days. What every single person could see with their own eyes wasn't true. They were told, everybody knew what was happening. President Trump was sitting there in the Oval Office telling the press secretary, you have to go out and you have to tell them that there were more people there. But Mr. President, it's simply not true. There's ways of counting this. You tell them what the truth is. And then that's how it all started. And then everybody went. Then you had Kennedy, then you had, what's her name? The lady that ran the campaign. I don't remember her name. Then she went out and then people said, like, how could you say this? What was her name?
Kellyanne Conway.
Kellyanne Conway, right? Thank you. So she went out and then she said, "Oh, because we're dealing with alternative facts." the craziest words ever stated. Alternative facts. Those are called lies. There are no such things as alternative facts. Hodaya sees the sky is blue. I see it as green. Factually, which one is when the light retracts? Which one do we see? Well, it's alternatively, I deal with different facts than Hodaya does. That's absurd. Try that on your next math test. right? Give the wrong answer. Okay. So, yeah. So Shlomi says nowadays the press isn't asking the attack questions. They'll start. But the truth is, it's just very calm. So you're not, so Shlomi's correct. This is why you're not having so much news. Okay. Because we're dealing with like people that are not trying to make news. The Biden administration is not trying to make news, especially not with things like alternative facts and getting caught up on how many people are standing outside and how many people are not. But yeah, eventually the Biden administration will do something wrong. They'll get caught in some sort of scandal, and we'll have our field day of ways of busting them. What I hope doesn't happen is that there's news about Israel. I hope that there's no news about Israel for the next 4 years. I hope we just go and like we have a good relationship and everything goes well, and we're just going to increase the spending that Congress will increase, and I don't know, maybe some miraculous thing will happen with Iran that'll go away and we'll get to build in Yehuda v'Shomron, and there won't be any discussion about it, and everything will be fine. I would like that to happen. I doubt it will. Okay, next question.
Yeah. Am I right that the Obama administration signed the 10-year memorandum of understanding, which gives Israel like $3.3 billion a year? Does that come up for renegotiation under the Biden administration? And what happens?
Every 10 years, I tell you what Rafi's talking about. America gives Israel money every year. Now, it doesn't give them cash. It doesn't give them a money. It does technically, but all the money has to be spent inside the United States only on military things. The reason why it has to be on military things is because there's an Israeli law that states so. Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he was the finance minister in the late 90s, not prime minister, he was the finance minister, he had a law passed that forbade Israel from taking money from other countries for their economy because he realized that our economy would never be strong unless we were self-sufficient. So that's a law that he made. So any aid that we get from the United States must be spent on military things. That's why we have the military jets from the United States. That's why Israeli soldiers, in their basic training, they have rifles from the United States. That's why when Israelis build tents, not like Israeli soldiers build tents, they all say property of the United States of American Army. Okay, that's right. So that's and that today is $3.8 billion. How do we get to that number? So President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu negotiates every 10 years. There's a negotiation. Before them was President Bush and Prime Minister Olmert did the one before them. It goes 10 years. Now, the president doesn't get, and under the Constitution, the president doesn't get to decide how much money is spent. That's Congress gets to decide. The president every year presents a budget. He says, okay, here's how much money I want to spend this year. I run the government. This is how much I want to spend. And he goes to Congress for permission to spend that much money. And then Congress passes every year a budget. Okay, the budget has different parts, but it's one budget that Congress has to say. And then Congress says, you can spend this money on this. If the president does anything else, if he spends money on something else, that's illegal. And he could be impeached for that. Okay, that doesn't happen. Okay, but that's okay. And there's like wiggle room. You can like take some money from this project to that project. Okay, but that's how it works. Part of the American budget is foreign aid. Okay, how much money we give to other countries. So for instance, I get to use my map here. Egypt gets $1.5 billion a year. Jordan gets, I think, $400 or $500 million a year. The Palestinians used to get, until last year, $400 million a year. Lebanon gets like $200 million a year. Syria gets nothing. Iraq gets, I don't know, like if you count up all the money that we spend in Iraq, it would be billions upon billions of dollars. Iran gets nothing. Saudi Arabia gets nothing. Okay, that's how foreign aid works. We give to different countries, and mostly because of their needs. So that's how it works. So Israel gets $3.8 billion that was negotiated, but it has to be voted upon every year. One of the reasons why AIPAC is so important, and this is so, you guys have to know this, is because there are no other lobbying organizations, none, not the Zionist Organization of America, for sure not J Street, not NORPAC, not all the other pro-Israel lobbying organizations. None of them lobby on foreign aid. None of them go to Congress and say, please give the money that was put in that memorandum of understanding, MOU, between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Please make sure that money gets passed. AIPAC is the only one that does that. And the reason for that is because AIPAC is very good at it, okay? And you might think, well, this is very easy. We've been doing this for like 30 years. It's just a repeat discussion. It's not true. I'll give you an example. In the early 2000s, we ran into a big problem, okay? The Republicans put into the budget that the only way money would be able to go to African women's clinics was if women's clinics in Africa did not have like paraphernalia that talked about abortion. Okay, it's called the Mexico rule. Okay, and they put in there that the only way that Congress can pass a law that allows money to go to African women's clinics for all other women's health issues is if there is nothing that talks about abortion there. If there's one pamphlet that talks about abortion, then it would be illegal for America to transfer the money to the African women's health clinics. Okay, so now you had Democratic members of Congress who feel that abortion is a good thing, say we can't pass this budget the way it is because we want pamphlets on abortion there. We think that's a woman's right to choose, and that should be there. And in fact, we think it's a health issue, and it should be there. So now you had a big problem because Democrats were not going to vote for the budget. You can't vote for one thing yes, one thing no. So now the Israeli aid was now being put up on the table. So you had AIPAC people lobbying Democrats to vote for a budget that they fundamentally disagreed with because they said, well, Israel can't, you can't leave us out without this money. We'll be at the mercy of our enemies, right? We're not gonna be able to fix our F-16s, and we're not gonna be able to have tents and all the other things that we need from America every single year. So AIPAC was in this, like, so it's not so easy sometimes to get this budget passed. Other years, it's very simple. This year, it was a big problem because progressives who hate Israel, not all progressives hate Israel, but those progressives who hate Israel made a big deal of it this year at the foreign aid passing because what they said was there should be $2,000 given to every American for COVID relief. Right? Americans are suffering economically, so every American should get $2,000 in their bank. Okay, and Congress came up and said we can only afford $600. We only think $600 is okay. So then the progressives said, well, where's the other $1,400 going that we can't afford to give every family $1,400? And they said, well, what else is in the budget? Well, hold on a second. We're giving like $600 million at that point in the budget to Israel for missile research. That's important. That's more important than American families. Giving money to Israel, who's an occupier and practices apartheid and kills Palestinians and is committing a genocide, that's more important than it. We can't, how could it do? So all of a sudden, Israel aid came up in question and came up in discussion, right? That's how like our enemies can use it against us. Okay, that's the idea. So then you have to go lobby and have discussions with people. And it's not that members of Congress that are going to fall for that line, but members of Congress don't want to seem like they're insensitive to that issue. So if all of a sudden they're going out and voting for only $600, but voting for Israel, they have to explain that to their voters. Their voters aren't sitting there saying you shouldn't give money to Israel. Their voters are sitting there saying you should have given us an extra $1,400. You're so excited to vote for the Israel aid. How come you're not excited to vote for our aid? Right? So that's what they have to. So it's easier for them to just simply say we're not going to pass the Israel stuff than to try to and not give the money than to deal with the nuance and the trying to get it through. Whew, that's the idea. Okay, but to answer your question, Rafi, the answer is no. We don't have to renegotiate the MOU. MOUs last through presidencies. The next one will have to be negotiated by the Biden administration at the end of this term. They'll have to negotiate a new MOU, and then we'll see what goes into the new MOU. Okay, any other questions? No one's got anything else? Okay. Let's discuss what we want to discuss. Oh, so I think that was one of my questions. Was one of the things that I had written was Shlomi's question about the Biden administration, about challenges. So let me just check my list here. Hold on. Israeli treatment of Palestinians. Good and worrying news on the Biden administration. Okay, so we discussed the Biden administration. One thing that was interesting that we have when it comes to the Biden administration. So you'll always hear about that Democrats are anti-Semites and the Biden administration hates Israel. You're going to hear these lines over and over, right? So this is my feeling, and you can decide whether you like this idea or you don't like this idea. My feeling is as follows. Let's not prejudge anybody until situations happen. Okay, that's feeling number one. So until the Biden administration does something that's anti-Israel, why call them anti-Israel? And why assume that they are going to do something anti-Israel? Right? Why make that assumption? Right? They shouldn't make that. That's point number one. Point number two is I don't know where we get as Israel advocates if we sit there and scream that somebody is bad for us, right? Where do we get, like, what's our goal here? Is our goal to make sure the Democratic Party is never in office again, or is our goal to get America to help Israel? My goal is to get America to help Israel. So I know that if I sit there and scream that Joe Biden is an anti-Semite, Joe Biden is not going to help me, right? That's right. If somebody calls you a racist, you're not going to turn around and be like, "Oh, what could I do to help you?" Right? You'll be like, "No, now I hate you." Okay, so right, so that doesn't help. So you want to build relationships. One of the most important things we're talking about, the most this meeting, right? Again, COVID, and this is something that Geller and I were talking about before, right? This whole program that we have, it's number one, it's supposed to have a lot more people in it, but number two is designed around lobbying. We used to do a lot of lobbying trips. We used to talk to members of Congress. Now there's nothing to talk about because of COVID, and we can't go anywhere. And we can't do any trips, and it's bad. Hopefully one day, very soon, we'll be able to get out of this, and we'll be going on trips to different places and talking to members of Congress about different things that are important to us. But the whole key is building a relationship, right? You need to have a good relationship with members of Congress, which is not hard to do. Everybody thinks that that's very difficult. It's if you offer them something, okay? So you just have to offer them. So I will give you an inside view of what Jewish teenagers are thinking about Israel. Okay, that's not something that they can get anywhere else. You're the only one that can give them that, right? Now you might think that that's valueless, but it's not true. All of your friends, right? I'm going to take Rebecca and Shayla here as an example. All of your friends within a year or two will be voters, right? They will be voters, okay? And some of them are going to be influential voters, and some of them are going to be leaders. And they would like for you guys to grow up to be admirers of these officials so that you reelect them to office, right? No one's dumb. They're not looking at 4-year-olds and thinking that. They're not looking at a 4-year-old and being like, whoa, 8 elections from now, that kid's going to be voting. I should give them a lollipop, right? But they are looking at a 16 and 17-year-old and saying, okay, in like a year, that person's going to be there, and in 10 years, that person could be running for office, right? That's right. That could be a real leader at some, at one point. So that's something that they're going to want to hear your perspective. So that's something that you give, and you give it for free, right? Call them up every 2 weeks, a staff member, and say, let me give you my perspective. That's a new perspective that they're hearing, right? Not only that, but if Rebecca calls up her member of Congress and speaks to a staff member and says something, guess what? That Shabbat at the Shabbat table, when Rebecca's sitting around with her parents and her parents' friends and everybody else, she's going to speak very highly of how well her member of Congress and their staff treats her. And they're going to have a different perspective on their member of Congress, and they're going to become advocates, right, for that member of Congress, and they're going to vote for them. And that's how members of Congress become popular, and that's how they get to do their jobs better. Okay, so they want to hear from you. So that's how you're able. So it's building relationships. But standing on a street corner screaming that somebody's an anti-Semite doesn't get us anywhere. Now, if somebody is an anti-Semite, I'll give you an example. Jamal Bowman is the new member of Congress from the Bronx, because the district covers Riverdale, the rest of the Bronx, and Westchester. Okay, this is a man who replaced Elliot Engel. Elliot Engel is one of the best friends Israel has ever had in Congress. Okay, he was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Not only was he one of the best friends we ever had, he was one of the most powerful friends we ever had. He dealt with all things that came about Israel in Congress, came to him before it went to the Congress as a whole. And he had to pass it through. And this man, who's a high school principal, Jamal Bowman, fought him in the election, and he campaigned much better than Elliot Engel. Elliot Engel is very old. It was during COVID. He wasn't really supposed to go out. He didn't even live in his district anymore. He lived in Maryland because he spent most of his time in D.C. and very little time in his district. And before Elliot Engel knew what hit him, he was done. Right? It was completely, he was done. So this guy, Jamal Bowen, we knew was not going to be good for Israel. Knew it in our hearts. And we fought, right? We fought. But most of his district are not people that are pro-Israel. Not that they're anti-Israel. They just don't care. Right? They're progressives who are worried about social justice issues, and they're worried about poverty, and they're worried about immigration, and they have different priorities, not Israel. So it's very hard for us to get traction. And Elliot Engel didn't really campaign. He just assumed he was going to win like the last 25 races, 15 races. So Jamal Bowman yesterday put out a tweet. It's unbelievable. He tweeted out from here. You know what? Let's be sophisticated here and technological. Hold on 1 second here. Do this well. I'll show you the tweet that he put out. One second here. I get to my page here. Oh, sorry. Oh, momento here. Give me 1 second here. Here we go. Almost there. Put the screen a little lower here. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, you guys see my here? So here's Jabab. I assume you can see this because I can't see what you can see. But here's If Not Now's tweet. Yeah, Joaquin Castro, who's a member of Congress from Texas. I'm disappointed and concerned by their government that Israel's exclusion of Palestinians living under Israeli occupation from these vaccination efforts, despite making COVID vaccines available to Israeli settlers. Okay, that's the next word. That's like me and Hodiah. Okay, and Abigail. So then the next thing says here. Then he tweets out that this is the member of Congress that we're talking about. Netanyahu must ensure that both Israelis and Palestinians have access to COVID vaccine. This cruelty is another reminder why the occupation must end. Okay. Now that's completely not true. Okay. That is 100% completely not true. In fact, I call it the Palestinian vaccine blood libel. Okay. Because it is completely not true. The facts are the Palestinians demanded autonomy, including over their people's health care under the Oslo Accords. As the Accords read, power and responsibilities in the sphere of health are in the West Bank and Gaza Strip will be transferred to the Palestinian side, including health insurance. The Palestinian side shall provide vaccinations. This is literally out of the Oslo Accords, what the Palestinians signed on to. Okay, Israel signed in, and the Palestinians are responsible for the health care of their people. It's Palestinian competence that led to their inability to provide vaccines to their people. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, it's not about us. Okay, that's not what it's all about. It's not Israel's fault. But this guy Bauman, okay, who's the what's it called? Who's this new congressman? Okay, what does he do? He comes out and blames Israel and buys this hook, line, and sinker. And now he's a member of Congress who's going around saying that Israel is practicing occupation and apartheid and is a strong voice. Now he's a member of the squad. Okay, so you'll be like, oh, he's nothing. But he's much smarter than other members of the squad. Okay, this is a highly intelligent individual who's going to be very strategic about how he places his criticisms. Okay, so that's what we have to worry about. That's somebody that we can sit there and say, okay, this guy's an enemy, we can criticize him. But the Biden administration, we shouldn't be criticizing them until there's a reason to criticize them. And if there becomes a reason to criticize, which hopefully there won't be, if there is reason to criticize, then it should be done in a non-hysterical way. It shouldn't be done the minute that they do something. You have to, like, he hires these people from the Iran thing, and you have people say, see, this guy, he's Hitler again. This is Hitler. See who he just hired? He hired John Kerry. He's Hitler, right? So that's ridiculous. Stop saying things like that. Okay, that's my tirade. Okay, any other questions here? Anything else?
And yeah, sure. Just in response to that Bowman tweet, you said he's not dumb, but then he obviously knows that what he's saying is a lie. So, I mean, even if there was a way to, like, I sent an email to his communication office, right? But even if I don't think that would have any difference, right? Because he knows that it's not true. So what does the truth matter to him?
So it's a very good question. Rafi asked a great question, right? If you spend a second investigating whether or not this is true or not, you'll see it's not true, right? So it depends. Not that the truth is subjective whatsoever, but if you accept the fact that Israel is an occupying power, if that's the framework that you approach the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? Then you're going to look at and say, I don't care what it says in Oslo because Israel's not practicing Oslo, right? Now, we'll sit there and say, we're not practicing Oslo. The Palestinians started blowing us up on buses. That was the end of Oslo, not our refusal, right? So if you're an occupying power, under the Geneva Conventions, occupying powers have to give medicine. So if you're Bauman, you're coming along, and the first thing you're saying is, no, you're an occupied power. You're an occupying power. Since you're an occupying power, you must provide the vaccines. Oh, what is about Oslo? Oslo hasn't been in effect in 25 years. Oslo was supposed to end in 1999. That's when Oslo was supposed to be finished, and there was supposed to be a Palestinian autonomy, and there was supposed to be peace, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is over. That's not over. So I'm giving you where he's coming from, right? He's not sitting there. Don't think for a second he's sitting there being like, okay, what can we come up on Israel today, right? And be like, let's say they're responsible for vaccines. Come on, that's a lie. No one will know. We'll just keep. He's not President Trump that comes up and say, "We'll just repeat the lie and people will believe it," right? That's not what's happening. Alternative facts. That's not what he's saying. He has alternative narrative, right? There's an alternative narrative. And that narrative is very dangerous to us, right? Because it's not based on the same way we read the situation, okay? So it's wrong, right? We read the situation and say, what about Oslo? He's going to say Oslo's practically, for all intents and purposes, Oslo's not being followed. Okay, Oslo's not being followed, but like it's still the law, right? That's the agreement that we have. Until everybody gets up and says, okay, we're not going to follow that agreement, that is the agreement. And you can't just walk away from it. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, anything else, folks? Okay, then I'm going to end this. Okay, if nobody has anything else, this is very good. I do want to apologize to everybody for yesterday's confusion. I'm sorry, I just copied and pasted the post from last week, like the WhatsApp message from last week, and then just repeated. So I wrote today. It was supposed to be tomorrow, and I'll try very hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. But no, if I ever do change the day of our meeting from like a Monday to something else, I will make a massive deal about it. So if you don't see me say, okay, this is for real, we're really changing this, like, and I don't go overboard on the thing, then just know that I made a mistake. Okay, so that's the deal. Okay, have a very good night, everybody. And
All right, Lila's over Israelis.
Thank you.
Geller, just stay on for a second.
Thank you.
Okay.